Λοιπόν, καλησπέρα σας και πάλι. Καλώς ήρθατε στο απογευματινό session. Ξεκινάμε με το τίτλο «Λαϊκισμός, δημοκρατία και κρίση». Η πρώτη ομιλήτρια είναι η Daniela Bozhinova από τη Βουλγαρία και θα μιλήσει με τίτλο «Αναβιώνοντας τη δημοκρατική κληρονομιά του πρώιμου λαϊκισμού». Daniela, it is you. You go on.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name is Daniela Bozhinova. I am a founder and member of the newest Bulgarian Green Party called the Greens. And also co-chair, I think I have been put in this capacity on the schedule, co-chair of Democracy International, which is a global coalition for direct democracy and participatory democracy, seated in Germany. Like our friends from Montenegro, I wanted to be positive. They call their party Positive Montenegro, and so I prefer to talk to you about positive populism, if there is such. I will refrain from getting entangled into definitions about populism and just go back in time to the birth of populism, to early populism, and I hope this will be my contribution to the discussion in this academic and activist event. So what we see today as citizens' activism, we definitely see a lot of citizens' activism, is early populism reborn. Originally, populism was the political philosophy of the People's Party. It's one of the so-called third parties in the United States, outside of the Democratic and Republican, that was established in the late 19th century. And the social and economic background of early populism, it was not called populism, it was called populism later, of course. Then it was known as the movement of popular republicanism. So the economic background was the industrialization of America after the Civil War. A time when a handful of businessmen amassed a lot of wealth, and not due to the economy of scale or innovation, but due to privileges, due to land that was given to them for free to build railroads, due to dominant domain, due to subsidies, state subsidies. So there was a citizens' movement against these privileges, which was a reformist movement, and based on this movement, the People's Party in America was created. A centerpiece in the political platform of this party, which was, maybe this is the time when for the first time populist demands, what would be later called populist, were articulated, was the platform of the party passed at the Congress of the party in 1896 in Omaha, Nebraska. And the centerpiece was direct democracy. And they understood direct democracy as a triad, or maybe triada, I don't know, it's a Greek word like many other important words. Triad of initiative, referendum, and recall. Maybe you know what each of these words mean. It's a concept in itself. Initiative is when the people have a legislative proposal because the legislators don't want to produce law on some important issue. Maybe it's their salaries, maybe it's the number of delegates, deputies in parliament. They have a conflict with issues, So then people have the right to legislate. This is called initiative. Then the referendum, they understood it in the American way, was just the right to veto, to stop or approve legislation that is produced by the parliament, by the Congress. So you exercise citizens' control, checks and balances on the product of your representatives. And recall was more person-related, because it is the right to recall, to take back your elected representative, could be governor, could be a congressman, if this person does not act up to the expectations, up to his or her promises, for misdemeanor, for corruption, and so on, then you can recall the person. So that's why it's called recall. And these people, unlike today's populists, what we call populists, were able to put into practice what they preached. Many of them got elected into government in many states. First populists, and then the progressive people from the Progressive Party. They took over the triad of initiative, referendum, and recall. And they introduced amendments of the state constitutions of 24 states, where more than half of the population of the United States today live. And the triad started working at first with a, even today, though there is a lot of abuse of the initiative of referendum and recall, and this is how they reformed representative democracy. This was a restructuring of the structure of power at the time. They were based on the Republican ideal of their country, saying that we have to take back our legislative power because we are the sovereign. They really believed in the idea of sovereign, what Alexis de Tocqueville calls the dogma of the popular sovereign is a reality in the United States. I am making this retrospective look back to the origins of populism just because I find a lot of stunning parallels in the reality today in terms of economic and social background, and what it produces in terms of social upheaval. Today we also see a strong drive for more democracy, for citizens' empowerment, citizen control, and direct decision-making, called to reinvent democracy. What we see, at least in the Balkans or South Europe, or at least in Bulgaria, where I come from, is a plenitude of phenomena that brought about reformist populism once, of which I have just told you. This is the dictate of monopolies, dictate of banks, oligarchy, non-representative legislature, soaring political corruption, definitely in my country, election fraud in my country. Maybe you've heard, we just had elections, and it turned out that there are 350,000 strips with which you vote, vacant, waiting for somewhere to be dispatched wherever they are needed to fill in the urns in the polling stations, which is actually fraud. It was a big scandal recently in Bulgaria, in international newspapers. So there is paralyzed judiciary, silenced media, mainstream parties, nobody trusts them, economic crisis, poverty, and social exclusion. So this crisis we have been living through since 2008 is not just a financial and economic crisis. It is clear to everyone that there is a deeper crisis underneath, and it is a crisis of democracy, a crisis of governance, of legitimacy of representative democracy, of its institutions. And this is both on the nation-state level and on European level. So like the popular currents of the early 20th century, like this popular republicanism that was later called populism, populism today has effectively retooled this cleavage, right and left, liberal, conservative, for many Europeans, and it replaced it with a conflict division that is typical for populism. At least here everybody agrees that populists, regardless of all sorts of definitions, that populists divide, that their main divide is them and us, the elite and the people, or I can use also another terminology invented by contemporary philosopher Ralph Dahrendorf, who talks about the command class and the obey class. So fundamental problems of democracy and this new cleavage between entrenched political elite and oligarchy on the one hand and common citizens on the other we have already mentioned it, was demonstrated by the Occupy movement, by the revolution in Iceland in 2009, the Indignados in Spain. I'm happy we have a representative of the movement here in this hall. The carnation-wielding Portuguese protesters. We also in Bulgaria, where I come from, had protests, very strong upheaval from below, and it toppled this February, and it toppled the government of the country. The government resigned, and that's why we had these extraordinary parliamentary elections recently. And of course, the popular protests and general strikes in Greece. So all these social economic developments produced populist movements of all stripes. So one of these stripes, which can be called also anti-politics, for me is truly democratic. The rejection of the political class is transforming itself into a belief in self-government. The idea that we, the ordinary people, are capable of governing ourselves. I had a very nice talk this lunch break, and I met Pablo, where is he? From Spain, who believes in self-government in water supply and sewage, especially in this sector, also in other communal services. And he came to Thessaloniki to help his co-thinkers prevent privatizations of the water company. From him, it's funny that from a Spaniard, I understand something about Greece, understood about 138 movement in Greece. So it's a drive for self-government. This is what the crisis has produced, one democratic things for me. I can also feed you in also on Bulgaria a little bit. In February 2013, this year, we had these protests, and they followed the national referendum. It was the first in 42 years that we had a national referendum. Finally, it was on nuclear power. It was invalid, but it's another thing that needs another elaboration about the design of referendum and direct democracy. And very surprising, because I, as a researcher and activist, have been dealing with direct decision-making for 10 years now. Mainly as a researcher because I cannot practice it. My country is not direct democratic at all. There are only few local referendums that haven't decided much, with the exception of the Burgas-Alexandroupolis referendum. But all of a sudden, because I think of myself as a utopist or having a person having exotic ideas, all of a sudden the streets in Bulgaria were chanting, we want citizens' control, we want direct democracy, we want to recall our representatives in parliament. And the elections passed under some of these slogans, some of these messages. Some new parties have taken these winner voter winning issues. And for example, one party at advertised itself, saying that they are going to introduce recall. If we elect them, they are going to introduce recall for our representatives in Parliament. So these things about direct decision-making and self-government are getting popular. Not only in Bulgaria, not only in Europe. But I have just prepared some examples to show you this movement for more direct democracy around us, at least in Europe. For example, okay, I will mention Iceland. You know, after they did not allow the bailout of the banks, they had this constitutional process where they interactively made their constitution. It's for the first time in the world. They used digital technology, crowdsourcing, and every Icelander could participate in the making of the constitution, and finally they voted for it. In Ireland, they're having also a constitutional assembly since January. It's a very interesting case of maybe democracy and anarchy, because part of it was randomly elected from the voters' lists. They elected 60 people out of 100 to make the constitution. Of course, they followed a certain algorithm, so many women, so many men, geographical coverage, and so on. Austrians have a certain progress in making their referendum legislation better, because their referendums are not binding, for example, which is very much bothering them. I have to remind you of the Switzerland referendum. Just maybe 3 months ago, they decided to impose oversight over the publicly listed companies, which is something absolutely new. Until now, people tapped and limited the institutions of government. And all of a sudden, we have publicly listed companies that are also a matter of, their management is a matter of general assemblies. This is absolutely new. Even a purely representative democracy like the United Kingdom introduced a referendum. They invited their citizens to say whether a change of their election system would be welcome or not. They wanted to change a little bit the election system. And they are planning also 2 more referendums, one in-out referendum on the European membership and one on the independence eventual of Scotland. And finally, because my time is over, I didn't calculate it talking, I would like to mention on a European level 2 things. The Citizens Pact initiative. There is a group of NGOs, leaders, politicians and social movements that want to make this multilingual space and debate before the next European elections, and to make us sort of a social pact, and they will mandate it to the future elected representatives in European Parliament what we citizens demand from them. And the initiative for new convention. I think that Greens have already made a resolution on supporting this new European convention. I have left some leaflets that say something about new European convention. It's based on activating, enforcing one of the clauses of the Lisbon Treaty, which says that in times of important change of the European Union, the treaty is the way it is designed and governed and so on. You may call a convention, which will include not only representatives of the European Parliament, national parliaments, but also civil society, to think about redesigning the future of the European Union, and this is something that is absolutely up to date. And I think there will be a campaign starting this fall, this autumn, for calling such a convention. And the prospects are that such a convention is called in 1915. So we see a lot of activism in this direction for more self-government and direct decision-making, which I think, and I'm concluding here and wrapping up, that Green parties have to embrace this idea, because anyway, one of our values of the Greens is grassroots democracy, and this is grassroots democracy per se. Thank you.